I think I'm going to start this one with one down the middle for them. I told them all that I would really like to hear their perspective on artificial intelligence and the challenges that it's bringing to each of their organizations, whether that's good or bad. And I would really like to hear both. We're going to dig into some other subjects, but I thought we'd start with artificial intelligence because it's come up so much today. So maybe, Erin, you know what, you're closest. How about I start with you, and we'll just go right down to get it started.
Sure. So my compliance officer is sitting next to me in the back and actually looked at me this morning and said, how are you speaking at anything that's connected to technology? You are the user error in every issue that you ever have. So I'd like to share that with you all first. So when I look at AI, the first thing we know as a society is you cannot stop progress. Everybody who's tried to do that has failed, so you have to accept it, you have to embrace it, and you have to figure out what you need to do with it. For me, when I look at AI, I need the professional development. I need somebody to sit next to me and teach it to me. I need somebody to sit next to me and show me all the things about it and how it works and how the kids are going to manipulate it. Because there is a 7th grader who already knows more about it than me and already knows how to use it better than me. And that's what I have to accept as an educational leader. So there has to be real, serious professional development for anyone who's not part of the new generation that has already jumped on board and embraced it. And not sitting in a big room and having somebody stand up and tell you about it. It's got to be hands-on. It's got to be your computer in front of you and you manipulating it, because that's the only way you learn to use it. And those are the kind of things that have to happen. But, you know, eventually what we need to do as a society, just like we did when the internet first came around and we had to deal with plagiarism on that level, is we're going to have to figure out a way to deal with plagiarism on this level. And one of you very bright technical people is going to write an algorithm or some other fancy thing and make that happen for me. So get to work.
Yeah. So like Erin, but fortunately none of the faculty, I don't believe there's any faculty here from Luzerne County Community College, so there is one staff member, hello, is here because when we started this discussion with our department chairs, coordinators, and our leadership team, most of the faculty, chairs, and leadership team were screaming, and they wanted to scream away from AI. But since then, we have started to work through our questions, our concerns, our anxieties, and actually in front of me is some good old research here to say that it isn't going away, right, Erin? And even the beta testers, that's what we'll call you, Erin, know that we have to basically live with it because we don't have a choice. And just some information, because as Don mentioned, I'm a statistician by trade, so can't wait here. 16 to 24-year-olds are the most likely users of AI. So of all of us around the table, we service 16 to 24-year-olds. Of course, we have non-traditional students, those are over 24, and some of our students in our school districts are younger than 16, but most students, or most people that use are 16 to 24. The average pay, and this is, by the way, based on a Pew Research paper that just came out actually 2 weeks ago. For those who use AI for good, and not for evil, I think, they make an average of $30 an hour. And those who don't use it, so maybe it's not, accessible to them in their work or not applicable yet, it's $21 an hour. So us as educators have the responsibility, and us as educator leaders have the responsibility that not only do we have to use AI, we actually also have to teach our students how to use it, because I also know that 70% of the jobs in the near future or currently, and this is middle skilled workers, and that's basically what community colleges, we train middle skilled workers. 70% of the jobs that they are going to get at the entry level are going to use AI as part of their work day.
Wow. Kathleen.
Well, I agree with everything said so far. I also want to say that I feel that we're already late in, we're late to the show right now. I remember being a high school principal. I was a high school principal for 13 years, and all of a sudden 500 cell phones showed up to school one day. And it was like, do we have a board policy? Do we have a plan? Do we know what they're doing on their phones? You know, what do we do? I think we have to get moving. That's, you know, I know at the IU right now, I'm bringing someone in to talk to superintendents in September about a superintendent in Long Island who's effectively using AI in elementary school already. So I believe we need to get our policies in order. I believe we better start professional development right away. I don't think this is something that's going to go away, so I feel we need to embrace it. We need to teach AI etiquette, and I think we need to get busy.
Rodney.
Don, you know me, and most of the audience members, you guys all know me. I am an engineer by training and not an academic by training. I just play an academic on TV, so I fake it. But as it relates to AI, I look at it, surprise, surprise, I look at it differently. It's just a tool, and it's the new shiny thing that everybody's making a big deal out of it. But realistically speaking, at the rate of change of technology, and I spent 20 years in semiconductors, and John was around here, my friend John, spent 20 years in semiconductors watching the rate of change of technology. We're talking about it now, but, you know, a couple weeks from now, it won't be the thing. Something else is going to be the thing. And I think what has to really happen is that, one of my colleagues just said that education and academia has to start speeding up a little bit to keep up with things, because in industry, if you don't keep up, you don't eat. In academia, it's becoming a reality that if we don't keep up, we are going to start facing that same reality. And so embracing AI and using it and all the rest of it is just the reality of where we sit now.
So does anybody want to follow up in the crowd as it relates to this particular topic?
Michael Bloxton, Nebula Space Enterprise in the Luzerne Bank building. You'll hear me talk it too if you want to go over there. Every one of you said reacts and responds. And one of the things that I think will never let you get ahead is by reacting and responding. Is there a way that, or is there a discussion, is there anything happening where the academics are actively looking beyond the scope of what's today? Rodney, your point about, we may not be talking about AI in a few weeks, but AI will be a tool that will be used for decades in some instance. So you don't necessarily have to know AI. I don't know AI. I've got people on my team that know AI, or cybersecurity and all these different things. And I don't need to be an expert in all those things because we have teams. And the professional development, from my perspective, should not be, you know, you guys have to learn these things. You guys would never, your resumes speak for themselves. I don't know how you have any time to travel and have fun anyway, but is there a conversation happening about how do we see the technologies that are coming that we can prepare for? So we can prepare for it before it gets here. Is there anything like that happening?
Yeah.
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 Yes.
I also think business and industry has to partner more with K-12. Like when I look around the room today, I think that my table might be the only table of K-12. But this all needs to be drilled down to elementary kids. So business and industry can't just speak to colleges. You have to speak to K-12. And what happens is business and industry speaks to colleges, and then colleges try to speak to K-12, and we've all played Whisper Down the Lane. You know how it gets to you by the time it gets to you. There have to be direct conversations. I know Skills in Scranton and the Scranton Chamber of Commerce is doing a lot. This way, I'm sure in Luzerne County the same thing is happening, but there needs to be more partnerships direct. That's going to be the key to making sure that we're not the last people to the table when we're the people that have to lay the foundation for what you need in your businesses.
Yeah. I would also add, one of the things that was said, and many of you know, I spent a lot of time looking at higher education and education in general across the spectrum from K through 12 all the way up through higher education. And it's become very clear to me in looking at this that education in general is probably the issue, because we have been doing education the way we've been doing it for the last, 1,000 years. And pretty much haven't changed anything. I mean, it was a radical innovation to say we were going online in the pandemic. That was a radical innovation in education. But we continue to educate the same way and wonder why, as the question was asked, why we don't lead technology and versus following it. It's because we keep doing it the same way. In part because it works and nobody has figured out a better way to do it. But the challenge is going to be, if we are going to be cutting edge, as was the question was asked, is how do we change ourselves? How do we innovate ourselves? How do we use technology to innovate ourselves and to do things in a radically different way? I don't just mean rearranging the chairs in the room, really radically changing how we transform that 16 or 17-year-old who, I've got 16, 17-year-olds, and they're, you don't necessarily think they're ever going to make it, into a functional and productive member of society at 22, 23 years old. There is a process that happens there, especially in higher education and prepping them for higher education in K through 12. We have a process that's tried and true, and we know it works. How do we radically transform that without losing the end product of how it works is our challenge, and I think that's where we sit at. And it's no small task.
I want to respond to us reacting. Absolutely, we are reacting to what is getting a lot of attention right now. But actually what we're reacting to is something that's been part of our lives for a long time. If you've been online and listened to a long message or a long list of options, that is somewhat driven by AI. If your organizations have a little chat box, ours is named Blaze, your favorite friend, maybe not, then you have already been exposed to AI. What we're doing at Luzerne County Community College is taking what we know of AI and how it's used and how we use that in the classroom so that we can get our students to be problem solvers and think independently, things that have been our goals and options for probably thousands of years with mixed success. But now with this technology and the technology we know they're going to use, we're basically asking our faculty to come up with innovative ways to restructure the questions that they ask, how they present their materials, how they follow up on that type of instruction. And when they suspect that a student is using what's been generated from an AI product, how do we have that conversation where it's not necessarily punitive, but what they've learned from that and what else could they do with that? So we're doing some of those things. And in terms of technology, it's not just AI. There's other things that actually we're going to be presenting to the board hopefully in 2 months. So I can give you the sneak preview here, Erin, with how do we use VR and AR for not only for instruction, but basically for some of our operations. How do we, it's come to my attention just a couple weeks ago that we have several drones on our campus that are dormant, and we use drone technology for almost everything here. I just moved to the area too, and so my realtor, my bank, everyone, they use drones basically to make sure that the house I lived in was actually my house, okay? And there's other, civil engineering, there's lots of applications of that. So we're going to be talking about how we are incorporating technology into the classroom. Now, I'll admit that is current technology. I think we also, to the person who asked the question, we also have to be proactive and think forward about how do we anticipate and what should we anticipate in terms of new technology. So that's where the connection with industry, and I'll be honest, our K-12 partners actually do some good stuff in terms of instructional technology too. But how do we connect to basically what's going to be happening in 5, 10, 15 years so that we can do right by our students?
Can I just add, though, that I do agree with what you said about education's been the same for the last 1,000 years. And I think there's a whole systemic problem in that, as a former teacher and as an administrator, you have so many PD hours with your teacher, and you have 18 state mandates that you have to cover, and if this teacher doesn't cover chapters 1 through 15, then none of my kids are going to pass the test. So there's that mentality, and then there's what's happening in the real world with AI the fun activities where they should be infusing them into the classroom, such as the drone projects and things like that, are extracurricular activities for those kids who maybe aren't on a sport or can stay after school and participate. So there's an entire educational systemic problem, because we may be thinking about AI here. I don't know how much the governor and I don't know how much the state is thinking about AI right now. So I think one of the most important things said here today was education has to change, and it's systemic, and that, Erin, you're right, we need to partner more with our community partners. We need to get kids and teachers out of the classroom and into the community, into the workforce, and see what's happening in our communities.
If I may, I think Michael asked the question that I think we all need to think about, which is how are we peeking around corners? And are we doing that well in the academic environment? That's a really good question. And I think Erin said, for those of us who are in the private sector, what are we doing with the K-12, not just the college institutions? I mean, I think those are two things that we need to sort of take away and think some more about, because those are some really good points. Angela, you got a question?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Great discussion, Cicely, as it relates to AI. Love to hear, and Dr. Marilou, you talked a little bit about leveraging the product internally for operational efficiencies. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that as you start to understand AI and see where you can apply that internally to your own organization, but then and how do you think that'll help from a student involvement perspective? Usage equals learning, and then you become experts in it.
Yeah, good question. I'll start with the beginning, and we're actually working towards the adoption of a product that when we are working with students that are interested to come to Luzerne County Community College or who have applied or accepted, how do we message that out? And for most institutions, including us, it's pretty flat. It's from one source, and sometimes that source is anonymous. With some smart learning and some AI, we can have multiple sources, because there is some research to indicate that some applicants and accepts are more attuned and are more likely to come to your institution if they hear from another student. Some are actually will be hooked to the school if they hear from a faculty member, and others if they hear from the president of the college or maybe your favorite board of trustees. I'm kidding. So with some smart learning and taking, and what I mean by that is when a applicant or accept or someone who's even just registered for the college is responding to that prompt, that electronic prompt, the smart learning learns on what that is, makes some assumptions based on some algorithms about that, and then can respond or point the communication somewhere else, but it is almost customized, if you will, based on that smart learning on that tool. So we're working through that. For a faculty, I think they realize that they can't just be asking the same questions. And so it can't be, name all of the war heroes in 1812. But it has to be more than that, and it always should be more than that. Maybe it's important to know all the war heroes of 1812. I can only think of one right now, Andrew Jackson. Remember, I'm a mathematician. But maybe about what their impact was in the future of the country. That's not to say that an AI product couldn't answer that, but getting to know your students also very important. What that answer is and making it personal makes it easier to know if this is just something that a student just basically typed in a prompt and got the answer, or really reflected on that, knew the content, and understood its implications. So we're working through strategies on how to do that. And then also basically coming up with questions, so turning sort of the instruction sideways, or maybe, a mirror of that, where the, and then is a good way for some more deep learning, is having the students to ask the questions, and then running them through AI, or running them with the faculty member, or running it from someone who's not even part of that discipline, and see that what comes up, and then do that comparison. So we're just really working on strategies on how we use AI, and then also adoptive strategies, so that if we know we have someone that's in our drafting program, or someone that is basically in our advanced manufacturing program, or even our professional rating program, how will they use AI or how do they conceive how they'll use AI when they enter, the workforce?
So Mike Cadaro from Alliance Wealth Advisors. I think I have an interesting perspective because I spent some time as an adjunct instructor, and I have a 2.5-year-old. So a little bit of a gap, but I think it's an important question. So as I'm listening to kind of like the workforce development question, and how do we get our arms around it more proactively, all of that incredibly important. But as a parent, which I think this is where this is coming from, is I'm terrified not of AI or workforce development, or like, we're gonna figure that stuff out. And it's not that it's not important, but I think like, if you just look at the last innovation of smartphones, right, and putting these computers in kids' pockets, and you look at the mental health changes that have come, like anxiety, depression, all of these things that you know much better than me, has gone up in a straight line with that. So how do we prepare these kids to handle themselves mentally, emotionally, plug for the 230, financially, to arm themselves to walk out of the building and be okay, and feel okay, and know that it's gonna be all right? This stuff's all important. But if everybody's walking around ready to have an anxiety attack, it really doesn't matter that much.
Can I take this?
Who wants to go first?
So here's what I'm going to beg everyone in this room who has children. Please cyber stalk your child and invade their privacy. That's your right. We have filters upon different sources to scan for everything in the world when they're with us. But most of the issues we're dealing with from a social media and a technology perspective are happening at night, because they're sitting in their bedroom on their phone and people have no idea, parents have no idea what they're doing. All the time, you get kids, you get families in who are in, and they're giving you an issue, and oh my God, this kid said this about my child, and this happened last night. And you have to stop and go, well, do you have any idea what your child said? Because, we throw the word bullying around all the time. Bullying is an imbalance of power. In my career, it's usually been a seesaw. You need to make sure you're just as actively involved in their technology presence as you are at their Little League game. And that's not happening. And what's happening is everyone thinks that we can manage this from a school perspective. We can't touch their personal devices without their permission. We have no right to do that. Because now you're getting into a whole bunch of gray areas that have caused a lot of different lawsuits that have risen all the way to the Supreme Court. You need to cyber stalk your child. And that, if I can leave you with one piece of advice, that's it. Because they're involved in things and doing things you have absolutely, positively no idea about. I was a high school principal. I ended the high school principalship and moved to a new position in 2014. The societal issues that I was dealing with at a high school level in 2014, I'm seeing now in 3rd and 4th graders. Because they have access to information of a maturity level that they don't even know what they're looking at or what they're reading about. But they're doing it in your living room, probably sitting next to you. So I can't police that. We can teach etiquette. There's CIPA laws in place for child internet protection that we have to follow. We make sure that there's lessons about etiquette and safety. We bring in every police and law enforcement agency in the world to talk to kids. And that used to be at the high school level. The last time I brought the county detectives in, they talked to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. If you don't think your child is doing it, you are naive. They are. Cyber stalk your child and invade their privacy. It is your right. You are their parent.
Can we just give Erin a round of applause for that?
Anybody want to follow up on that?
I don't want to follow up on that, but I
Agree.
do want to say that I guess that's one way instruction may have changed in the last 1,000 years. So when I started teaching, I actually started teaching as a high school mathematics teacher. There was really no cell phones. There were flip phones maybe, but the 11th graders that I mostly taught didn't have them. And then when I started college, people had their cell phones, but they didn't necessarily bring them to class. I worked for a residential college. And then they started bringing them to to their class. But at that time, you could take them away. Of course, you had to put them in a place where you could see it and then give it back to them. Now we can't, as Erin said, touch their cell phones. We can certainly have, as our policies in our our classroom instruction management piece of that you can't have it on, or you can't be looking at it, or you can put it in the front of whatever instructional table or whatever you're at, but you cannot really take it away from them. And if they want to be on their phone or searching the internet on their tablet while you're teaching, there's not really much you can do about it. You can't even actually ask them to leave the class. So it's definitely a different world now. And so, stalking, cyber stalking is actually a good idea. But you can't do that for 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds. All you can do is basically model good behavior and stress the importance of staying focused.
Before I go to another question, anybody up there want to comment about mental health in general?
I live this world every day. There's just not enough resources. We need resources. We refer kids on a regular basis for help, and there's just not enough places to go. Waiting lists are unbelievably long. And, it's hard. Mental health is a hard thing for people to understand. And one of the things I've said through my whole life is you would never tell a person in a wheelchair to stand up. We wouldn't do that. But we would tell somebody in a deep depression, oh, get over it, just feel better. It's the same thing as telling the person in the wheelchair to stand up. We need to bring in, and this is a national issue, we just need so many more resources to be able to address the issue. And I mean, if you want to know what a true issue in our area is, go to an emergency room for people who are there involuntarily or voluntarily for mental health treatment, and watch how many of them are sent home because there's just not a place for them to go.
Erin, I can follow up with that. At the IU, we're opening up partial hospitalization programs here in Dunmore and in Elk Lake, and we are struggling to fill positions. As a matter of fact, this morning we're putting an ad out in the Times, like half a page. It's just amazing that we can't find anybody to man those classrooms. So the shortage is unbelievable in mental health professionals as well.
Anyone else? Jason, you had a question?
I know. I actually changed my question after hearing some of the responses. Hi, everybody. Jason Washoe here from Show Technology Solutions in Scranton. We're a software development, engineering, and consulting firm. And, I have my 14-year-old daughter here, and she's going to kill me for doing this. And I also have one of my interns here, Devin, and I think both of them could back me up in saying that I value original thought, because we would not be in business right now if it wasn't for original thought. There's no way that artificial intelligence can change what we do for our clients. That we are exploring how it is going to become a tool for us, because the one thing that Sister Roberta at St. Mary's of Assumption in South Scranton in 5th grade taught me is how to do long division, but also how to use a calculator. Rodney said it before, use it as a tool, but don't replace what you do on a daily basis with it. So I'm always trying to encourage, one, original thought, and two, critical thinking. And my question to you all is not how do you do that to our students in school, but what advice do you have to us as parents and employers and educators to inspire original thought and critical thinking to at least not defeat AI, but also to somehow embrace it?
Can I, do you want to go? Because I've already responded to questions I probably shouldn't have. Is there any math teachers in the room? Okay, before I say what I'm going to say. So, and I'm sure I'm part of the problem, or was, or maybe still is. But when we complain as higher education or as educators that students come unprepared and they don't know this and they don't know that. By the way, I taught 8th grade honor algebra last period of the day, so I'm going to heaven in some shape or form after having that experience. But we have to let students explore on their own terms, because the analogy or the connection to being a middle school and high school mathematics teacher is that sometimes we just kill the interest and the creativity and their ability or wanting to explore with basically because the state, and I was teaching at a public high school, has all these mandates and we have to get them, and there's required testing at 4th, 8th grade still, yeah, and 11th grade in some states. But we have to understand that actually just as important is to let them explore and basically understand what they know and what they don't know, and put things in front of them that seem that they're absolutely unrelated to the subject area or subject or discipline that they're teaching. And we don't do that enough. So I don't know if that's answering your question. I think it's more of a mea culpa. And I actually like to thank Sister Mary Regis, who actually instilled on me that I actually had the ability to be a mathematician. But so I had that mentor, but not many, as you've heard here, students do not. So I think it's just giving them the opportunity to just play. And in fact, we are looking at some strategies where we use gaming. And actually, we have this is a shameless plug, and I think Kevin Jones is in that. We have a new certificate in game art and design, not just because it's cool and we can have athletes or esports athletes, but that's actually how many organizations and in industrial settings are training their employees. But anyway, just we have to allow our students to be creative and give them the chance to do that.
Go ahead. I'll go
Well, I think what she's speaking about is something that we focus on every day, and Jason, you're familiar with this, is what we call experiential learning, right? Because the textbook only goes so far, right? And then you run out of what is really happening. And Jason, you mentioned your 14-year-old daughter, and one of the things that we look at, and I work with 20-year-olds all day, so AI and all the technology things are sort of natural in our world that we embrace all of those things. But the thing that we've come to grips with really quickly is that for your daughter, the job she'll be doing when she's sitting in your chair hasn't been invented yet, right? Hasn't been invented yet. So how do we prepare her now for the job we don't even know it exists, right? And it's called creativity and innovation, right? And teaching the skills that are foundational to all innovation, all learning, all technology. My kids and I were watching the Hidden Figures movie, you know, the ladies at NASA that did the whole thing. And I was telling them that Katherine Johnson and those ladies there, if you brought them back right now and stuck them in any industry right now, they would be at the head of all the industries right now. Why? Because they knew foundationally how to innovate. It would take them a week or two, and they would be AI, they would have figured it out. All those things they would figure out real quickly because they understand foundationally how to manipulate what is foundational education. And I think it's our job as educators not just to give them that foundational learning, but to give them a chance to try it in the real world setting, without a safety net, without all that kind of stuff. And if you do that, what you'll find is, one, most students have no idea what they want to be because they you know, I want to be an engineer because Uncle Charlie drove a Corvette, so I want to be whatever he was, right? So, but they don't really know what that means. They don't really know what half the jobs mean. We don't even know what half those jobs means now. What's an influencer? I have no idea, right? So the question just becomes, how do we prepare them? And I think it's incumbent on us is experiential learning. Let them go work on things in teams and in other ways and give them the preparation, give them the goal, and then get out of their way and watch them either fail or succeed or whatever and help them along the way and surround them with the right resources, right tools. But I think we as educators have to change how we see how that goes.
And I was just going back to your question about, what do we do as parents? And Erin, can probably vouch for this as well. I was superintendent of an elementary district, so the typical attendance at a PTA meeting is about 40, especially if it's pre-K to grade 3. You're going to have a lot of parents at those PTA meetings. I was high school principal. I was lucky if we got 6. And we would throw programs, we would have awards, we would do everything possible, parent workshops, to bring more parents into the building. And people, I was 20 minutes outside of Manhattan, so a lot of people took the train home. We would start the meetings at 8 o'clock so we could accommodate everybody. We offered babysitting. We still had low parent turnout because there's also a mindset that, okay, when they go off to 7th, 8th, 9th grade, I'm done. It's all on them now. They have to do it. And as Erin said, you have to stalk their social media. Well, you have to kind of know what they're doing in high school and middle school as well. So it really just goes back to good parenting and instilling that creativity in them and asking the good questions. And I'm not saying micromanage the curriculum and drive the teachers crazy, but it does go back to being just that type of parent.
Can I have one thing? So I'm old now. I never thought I'd be that person, or I don't know really how it happened. But I started teaching in the mid to late 90s before standards came in. So when I first started my career, you kind of had an open slate. There's a curriculum to follow, but you were able to do a lot of neat stuff, and you were able to do a lot of fun things. And when standards came in, I'm one of the few people who will say, I don't think in their initial conception they were a bad idea. We were trying to norm out that everybody got some equal education, and that everybody had a benchmark they had to hit. And in reality, that's a really good idea. The problem with Americans is we don't know how to do anything to the middle. We have to take things so far to the extreme that it becomes something that it was never meant to be. So we've taken standards and standard-based testing so far to the extreme that art and music and creativity have gone out the window. And I'm guilty of that as an educational leader, because when those scores are published in the newspaper, they don't care if you offer library, art, and music. It comes down to what is that score and how does it look. That's where our problem is right now. We swung the pendulum so far to the one side now that everything is based off an English, and math, and a science score. And that's what everyone's working for, because you don't want to be in the bottom of the barrel when those scores come out. You don't want to be the superintendent trying to explain to the board why your scores are low. You don't want to be the principal trying to explain to the superintendent why the scores are low. So we cut things. And it happened at a time where, if you look at it historically, 2 things happened at the same time. We brought standards-based education in with high-stakes testing, and educational budgets went down the toilet at the same time. And that was a deadly combination, because we became so hyper-focused on score results that to add in the things we needed to do to try to increase those, what did we cut? Art, music, library, and the areas of creativity. Yep. So, best story I was ever told was on a teacher who went to an educator in the workforce training. And they were at the makeup factory that's somewhere in Lackawanna County, in Jessup, I believe. And the chemists were being trained in art because they knew how to make the makeup, but they didn't understand the color palettes. We have to have a balance. We need to bring the pendulum back to the middle. Standards are great. Everyone should have a goal. Everyone should be reaching benchmarks. Everyone should have something that they have to be held accountable to. But we went crazy. And when we go crazy, then this is the kind of stuff that happens. So now we're going to have to take a whole bunch of time to bring the pendulum back and to bring that creative side back into schools.
You know, I constantly ask the crowd for the questions, and so I'm going to actually ask if it's okay. I'm going to ask permission. I'm going to turn it this way. I'm going to ask you, is there anything that any of the four of you want to say about the environment, about the situation, a topic that you want to make sure we get out on the table? I heard Erin's topic. I mean, that was quotable. That was wonderful, by the way. Is there anything that you all want to make sure this group of industrialists, teachers, parents, influencers would like to hear? What do you want to hear from them? I've heard a few things. I want to make sure in the last 15 minutes we cover that. I can keep asking questions out here, but I'm going to ask you, is there anything you want to make sure that we get to touch on that's really important to you?
Actually, while they're thinking, I would be remiss if I didn't say that one of the reasons that I wanted to get more involved in TechBridge was because of the competitions that I think are incredibly powerful and impactful, and not for me, but for our students to be involved in them, because it does play into that creativity, and sort of they're basically taking ownership for that. And second of all, if Kevin Jones is still here, he was instrumental in our new program, that Certificate of Game Art and Design. I have not one sort of artsy sort of cell in my body, so.
Well, that was a gift to me, so thank you very much. Anybody else? What do you want to be talking about? Rodney.
There's probably a myriad of subjects there, Don. But if I had to pick one, and it's one that we hang our hats on where I'm at, it's a room full of, an eclectic room full of people. It's the perfect place to discuss the notion of partnerships and how we move forward. Because I've heard, and as educators, we always are harping on a couple things. We're always harping on resources. We're always harping on other challenges that we might face. Yet in the room, I see entrepreneurs, I see other people who are facing that challenge every day. My buddy Hayden here is one young entrepreneurs that, and Okrepke's in the back. I saw Ken funding. The notion of how we can actually change the situations that we face by working together. Because I always say, if you're trying to lift the world by yourself, it's heavy, right? But together, there's a lot you can do together. And I think that if we would embrace the notion, especially as higher education and educators, as a lead, to make sure that we have strategic and well-placed partnerships to solve many of the major issues that we think are real challenges, won't be so big if we do it together. And when I bring up partnerships, I really am talking about shared reward and shared risk. So a partnership isn't a partnership, especially education to industry. We can always call a partnership when industry funds us, that's a partnership. That's not really a partnership, that's called philanthropy. It really becomes a partnership when, if the partnership falls, both institutions suffer greatly, right? And both institutions are taking just as much risk. And industry, by its nature, has to be risk tolerant. Education hasn't had to be that way. But we have got to learn to embrace a certain level of risk tolerance. Otherwise, we're going to just continue to sort of rearrange the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. We're not really doing anything. The ship's going down. We need to really innovate and change how we're doing things. So if it was me, it would be talking about partnerships and how we really change how we're really attacking the big issues of the day together in a real strategic, in a real way.
And so, Rodney, let me ask you, what does that look like?
It looks like many of the things that, sort of we are embracing. I bring up Hayden because his company is a company in our business incubator, and he's doing some wonderful new things. Somebody asked about how do you stay ahead of technology. The way you do it is you get with people like him. Hayden's doing some things with film and with developing a platform, and we struggle with how we get our message out. And Hayden's developing a platform that's going to transform how how we receive messages, how we look at content as a small university. And rather than waiting for somebody to come in industry and bring it out and then we're the last ones in, we're innovating with him. And so my students are helping him to do it. We're going to be embracing, we're the first customer. It's going to be in our curriculum. I'm going to let him teach the classes. We're going to do it in a way where it's together. And so if his company succeeds, we're going to be great. But there's a risk there. It might not succeed. So what happens if it doesn't succeed? We have to also, as higher education, be ready to say, okay, it didn't work. How do we pivot? So that to me, Don, is sort of how these things are done. And Hayden's just one of 100 things that we're doing that way.
Anybody else?
The only other thing I'm going to say is we have to figure out a way to make education attractive for people again. Again, I'm old. When I graduated from college, we gave out over 50,000 teaching certificates in the state of Pennsylvania that year. We gave out 4 last year. My generation's getting ready to retire. There's not going to be people to take those spots. Right now, it's like a cage match to find science and math teachers in our area. So the fields that we need the best and the brightest in to make our kids prepared for higher education and for these careers, we can't find people to fill those positions. Look around at the postings that are still online from local districts. Timmy Wolf is here. He's the HR director in the Scranton School District. Timmy, how many open jobs do you still have? 22. Come on, 10 years ago, can you imagine that? Scranton School District can't fill 22 positions. That's where we are right now. Hey, we're not alone. Nope. 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 But I mean, you know, you're watching. It's not the profession. My high school principal's sitting in the back right now. She was at her son's going to college, and she was just out at the University of Pittsburgh. And when the schools were saying, okay, if you're going into pharmacy, if you're going into nursing, if you're going into business, come with me. Nobody stood up to go to the School of Education. It's a problem, you know. And you kind of, in the media, you'll hear a little bit about the teacher shortage and the teacher crisis right now. But we want to talk about not being reactive, being proactive. 5-6 years from now, you won't have bodies to fill classrooms. So if you have little kids, that's a problem. It's a real big problem. So that's something we have to figure out real quick. How do we make education an attractive profession again? Because it's just 50,000 to 4 in a course of 24, 25 years. It shows you where the interest level is right now. And if you don't, I'm gonna sell my own job right now. But if you don't have K-12 education, where are we going as a state or a nation? We saw during the pandemic, everyone finally went, whoo, we need schools. Because when you were trying to teach your kids in the kitchen, really wasn't going well, was it? Like everyone kind of realized, whoo, oh, wait a minute, maybe they're not that bad of people.
Final thoughts.
Yeah. If I could, and actually, this was some of my initial thoughts, knowing we were going to talk about innovation and innovation in education. I have this book here. It's called The Great Upheaval. I thought, actually, that's a great title for the first session after lunch. But besides that, it's by Arthur Levine, who's actually one of my heroes. And it talks about, where is education going? And actually, can we really predict what education is and where we're going to be in 5 years? And the answer is probably not. But what we can do is to be the best of what we can and do best by our students. Also, something that didn't get touched on a lot here is that the fact that, yes, there's a shortage of teachers, there's a shortage of workers in many, many fields. And there's also, as you know, there's been a sort of a downturn in the number of students that are attending colleges and university, especially in NEPA. And so with that, we've been coming up with some creative ways to increase that pipeline, and I mentioned one of them about using some smart thinking on our communication to students that are interested in going to Luzerne County Community College. But what we also have to assure, if we're going to do right by our region, if we're going to do right by our students, if we're going to do right by the society, as we have to think about those that don't have the same opportunities as we do. And I think it was mentioned in my bio that my research actually is access and education. And even though maybe we provide access to underrepresented students or students of low socioeconomic class who have lots of challenges, we have to do right by them while they're in college or in high school or in grade school, and make sure that they have those support systems so that they're successful. Otherwise, we can educate and we can graduate someone that's going to be the next Nobel Prize winner, which I actually hope happens while I'm still the Vice President of Academic Affairs. But if we're not at the same rate, if we don't have the same success rate for the students that have the challenges and didn't have those opportunities as those who did, then we can't consider ourselves being a successful institution.
Would you like the last word?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I just want to say thank you. I've been back in this area now for the last maybe 11 months, and I spent the last 17 years prior to this in Long Island, in Nassau County, Long Island. So if you look up the schools in Nassau County, Long Island, they're some of the top schools in the country. They're rated top by Newsweek magazine and everybody else under the sun. But since I'm back here, I've never been so impressed. And I'm impressed with the level of commitment of the community, of the businesses in the area, of the partnerships, this opportunity, your organization. For 17 years, I have not attended a seminar like this in Nassau County. They're not happening. So you're ahead of the curve in that respect because you're thinking about it, you're moving forward. We're thinking about ways to get, which I think is, when we do find those teachers that we're short, we need to get them out of the classroom. We need to get them out into the community and let them know what's happening. And I think this is a great way to start, and we need to support those teachers when they want to think outside the box on other creative ways to teach their kids. So I want to say thank you. I just got back here, and I'm honored to be back home. This isn't happening everywhere. So you should be very lucky to be here today, and you should be very proud to live in this area. So thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen.